Hey guys, I'm here to talk about my favorite games of 2021. I got a list of five, and I'm going to put them in an order, but it's not a super important order. Like, you could convince me that one could be five and five should be one, and whatever. But before we get into that, I did want to ask you to please like and subscribe. That makes me feel better and it helps the channel out. And in fact, if you subscribe, I will make an embarrassing phone call for you. If you want to miss work, you want to break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, hit the subscribe button. I got your back. Anyway, without further ado, I do want to talk about one game that did not make the list, and it didn't make the list because I simply haven't had time to play it yet. This comes from a series that I put easily over 1,000 hours into, and that is Final Fantasy XIV. I have not got a chance to play Endwalker yet. I go through these cycles where, like, I play and just binge on Final Fantasy XIV, but currently I'm in a cycle where it just doesn't seem that appealing right now. And I can't really explain why, but I'm sure that if I had played it, it would definitely be on the list. Anyway, I want to start with my number 5 game. A game that I really, really enjoyed. But if I'm honest, I had no anticipation at all for this game, and in fact I didn't play it for months until after it came out, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy. I played it on the PS5, and I only played it because they had this gigantic Black Friday sale, and it was like $25. But once I started playing it, I didn't stop playing it. The story is super engaging, the characters really come to life, the writing of the entire story, including the dialogue and the banter, but everything kept you so engaged that, like, there is moments in this game where you really do feel kind of helpless. Like, you're up against this gigantic obstacle and you don't know exactly how you're going to overcome it. Not to mention the fact that the battle mechanics are incredibly creative and super fun. And I would say 95% of the game, the battles were really, really fun. Towards the end, the enemies kind of become bullet sponges, and it gets a little bit of a slog, if you will, but I really enjoyed this game, and I was super, super surprised by it. Number 4 on my list is one that, in my heart of hearts, is probably my favorite game of the year, but I had to drop it down a few notches because it was a remake, and a lot of people have played it before. The thing is I hadn't, and that game is Skyward Sword. This Legend of Zelda adaptation from the Wii game really, really sparked something new for a lot of people because they offered button controls. They gave you that same great, Legend of Zelda story, all that, the great tradition that we love in Legend of Zelda, with the dungeons to explore and your main goal of eventually fighting off the big bad guy and saving the world. And it has all those elements in there, as well as the multiple items that you collect and power-ups that you get, all sorts of stuff. It's a great Legend of Zelda game. One of my favorite that I've ever played. The thing is, like I said, it's kind of old, and a lot of people have played it before, and I just think it got slept on because a lot of people have already experienced it, or they weren't exactly happy about the controls, and I do understand why there were a lot of people conflicted about it, because it was a game that, like, you really kind of had to train your muscle memory into playing. Like, it took me a while to not hold the left trigger on my Switch while using the camera in other games, because I got so just used to doing that with Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. But for me, I really, really liked it, and I appreciated that Nintendo at least did something for The Legend of Zelda and its 35th birthday. Number 3 on my list is a game that I think should have been in a lot of, like, mainstream media's games of the year, and a game that should have been talked about because I actually think it was better than most people's 2020 game of the year, and that being Hades. This 2021 game I'm speaking of is Death's Door. I loved Death's Door, and I think there's so many people who I've talked to who weren't really excited to play it. They're like, this is a Souls kind of game, and it seems really hard. They didn't even like Hades that much because they complained about the difficulty and the way that it just kind of pushed you down. But after playing this, they were addicted to it and couldn't stop playing it. And part of the reason why with Death's Door is, yes, it is a very difficult game. You will die quite a bit. But if you're going to run a mile, they give you a few yards. They give you a few feet in there. And every time you die, you get just a few more feet. And eventually, will have accomplished your mile goal, and you feel so validated by being able to take on such a difficult game. This game is kind of a typical roguelike with the same dungeon exploring and ability upgrades. You get a lot of different abilities, actually, that are incredibly important in the game. Also, there's a lot of RPG mechanics to the game, where when you beat an enemy, you collect souls, and you can then take those souls and upgrade yourself. Like, you can upgrade your dexterity, your strength, your haste, your abilities. So in a sense, it is very traditional, but at the same time, every time you die, it takes just a half a second and you're back to where you were, and you got to keep your souls, you keep your abilities, your equipment, all that stuff, and you have the knowledge of the pattern that you're going to fight, like the bosses, move rotation and whatnot. So yeah, Death's Door, great game. I think it was a little bit slept on. Not enough people paid attention. So I'm going to cop out with number 2 a little bit, because number 2 is, let's just say it's a shared number 2. I couldn't quite decide where I wanted to put some of these games. Number 2, though, for me is Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now, it also shares the number 2 slot with Tales of Arise. Both of these games are incredible RPGs that I just fell in love with. And they're two sides to a very fun RPG coin. One side, Shin Megami Tensei 5, is kind of desolate. It's a lot of people use the cop-out of it's an adult Pokemon. I disagree with that. It does have some of the mechanics of a Pokemon game. It is just you, and you're out essentially collecting demons, and you can fuse these demons, and they are what makes up your entire team. I would say, though, instead of it being like a catch-em-all kind of game, because you don't want to be the master of demons and whatever, no, you actually collect more demons and fuse demons and create new demons because it's part of the strategy of the game. If you end up at a boss or even just a random other enemy out there and you don't have the proper abilities, you're gonna die. And this game is incredibly difficult. I spent probably the first 20 hours of the game just grinding, which I often do in difficult RPGs, and I still had a lot of problems to actually beat the game. Like, it took a lot. So it's not just, hey, grinding's going to get you through this. You also have to have the knowledge of the rock, paper, scissors mentality of the RPG, the weakness, the strength, all of that stuff. The story is really, really good, but it is, really, like I said, desolate, kind of depressing in a way. It's got an engaging story, though, and the character development and the world building is really, really great. It's a game that you can easily and pretty much have to sink about 100 hours into, but it's definitely worth your time. As for Tales of Arise, it tells a great story, and I think there's a bigger story to be told there. I don't want to interpret it for everyone, but it does have to do a lot with oppression, and it has to deal with, like a classist world, if you will. But they don't, just shoehorn that into your face. It's something that you kind of discover or you can interpret in your own manner. But a lot of it does have to face with real-world problems, but set in an RPG environment. And that classic, I don't want to give too much away, but I would say, that classic massive plot twist that the bigger picture is much more important than the minute issues that you're dealing with at the very beginning of the game. But on the other side of what I think is great about this game is also the combat. I love the combat. It's so fast. It's very chaotic at first, but you really do start to figure it out and understand what you're doing. I love how you can upgrade all of your abilities, just the character building and that whole thing about the traditional JRPG. They really hit it right on the head, because not only do you have all that stuff that we've all come to love with JRPGs, but they've added a lot of other elements into the game and really brought it into the 21st century. Up until I really sat down and thought about it, I honestly thought Tales of Arise was probably my number one game. But the number one game, I think, kind of missed a lot of people's attention just because of when it came out. And I know that essentially a lot of people are probably thinking like a Halo or Horizon. No, I'm actually going way, way early 2021. And a game I think a lot of people kind of forgot about and how great it was. Monster Hunter Rise. Love Monster Hunter Rise. It is without a doubt my number one game because of the entire environment finally being so accessible to so many people, yet keeping a lot of the tropes that we love from Monster Hunter. We love the ability to track these gigantic monsters down, set traps if we need to, use whatever weapons that we feel comfortable with. Then we can start upgrading and start crafting our own armor and our own weapons that we get attached to or we have to use because of a certain element that a monster is weak to. There's so many just customizationable things. I don't even know if customizable is a word, but I digress. This game has so much to it. And what really, for me, tipped the scales is the replayability of the game. Like something like Tales of Arise or Shin Megami Tensei 5, yeah, they're great and they'll last you a very, very long time. Like they're super, super worth the money. But once you're done with it, you're kind of done with it. There's some like hardcores who will go back and try to work on things or discover things or 100% it and whatever. And that's cool. That's for them. But for the mass majority, they'll play it, they'll beat it, and they'll be done with it. But Monster Hunter Rise, you're never done with it. and it's a good thing. And they also keep coming out with DLCs, with add-ons. We got that major DLC coming in summer of 2022. Not to mention like the Capcom stuff and a lot of other things that they've really integrated into what is Monster Hunter Rise. And I can't speak enough about how great just the single player is. But that's only like half the game, because a big portion of fun factor with this game is the multiplayer. And rather it's matchmaking, which I had a lot of fun just playing with like random people who I didn't know, and thanks to Nintendo, I couldn't communicate with, but we still kind of all had the same goal. We knew what we were doing, because it's not like rocket science. Track the animal, kill the animal, you're good. But I had a lot of fun doing that, as well as grouping up with a lot of my friends and playing it that way. I'm excited for this game to get on the PC and like bigger platforms, just so other people can experience it, because I really do think like this is a game that, like, had it come out in, let's say, like holiday 2021, people would still be obsessing about it, and it would be in like the award shows, and people would be talking about how great this game was. But I think we just kind of all forgot, because it's almost been a year since it's been released. But anyway, yeah, that's my list. Again, I can be convinced that Shin Megami Tensei should be 1, or that Guardians of the Galaxy should be 2. The list isn't set in stone, but that's just my feelings on it. I'm curious what your thoughts are. What were your favorite games of 2021? Anyway, guys, I appreciate you. Have a good one. Take care.